My name is Jo Lathwood. The show is called The Belief in Things Disappearing, and it's at Mirror Gallery in Plymouth. So the main work is a film that kind of relates to all the other works. There's drawings that are on recycled paper, there's some bronze sculptures, and then there's another digital work that's a time-lapse. The show was really developed around the idea of things disappearing because I wrote a sustainable manifesto in 2020, and that really focused on different materials that I've used in the past and trying to think of new materials that I could use that would have less impact on the environment. So that was sort of one of the starting points. And then I was basically sitting in the studio a lot, doing a lot of reading around sustainability, slightly unsure of what I could actually physically make. And then started thinking about, okay, well, what are the things that are related to those subjects in the wider context? And so I suddenly got really interested in waste and all the things in my bin and the recycling bins. And I also started thinking about other things in culture that make things disappear. So I started looking at magicians and started a conversation with a really great magician called Peter Clifford. So magic and waste became the kind of backbone for the exhibition, and then everything was sort of built off of that. So the show started as a self-directed challenge to make everything disappear, and I've made quite a few artworks previously where I've considered what happens to all the materials after the exhibition. And because I was starting at the end of the show, if you like, with this one, it meant that I could super consider everything. So an obvious example would be the den that holds the film is all made out of recycled timber that's been used before. And after the show, all of that timber is going to go to the next show and be exhibited in a totally different format. The cladding of that structure is made out of blinds that we've borrowed from Plymouth scrap store. So they're all going to be gently, all the staples removed, rolled up and then taken back to the scrap store to be used again in another iteration. So each work that's here, maybe apart from the drawings, have got a kind of time frame around them, and they're only really going to exist for this exhibition. And I've been thinking about what to do with the drawings, and I think the best way of kind of approaching that in regards of them disappearing is that I think I might put a sort of time stamp on them, so they're only going to exist for a certain amount of time. Because I don't want to keep them forever. I'm not interested in the artworks living past my lifetime, controversially maybe. But the drawings are made out of an ink that's natural but is actually incredibly permanent, but then the paper that they're on isn't very permanent. So that brings this kind of dichotomy between the two in quite an interesting way. Some of the works in the show are made with biomaterials. There's actually one sculpture made out of biomaterial, which is a mixture of agar-agar, which is a type of seaweed, waste coffee, glycerin and water. And it's a little ladder, it's quite hidden in the exhibition space. But then there's also a video work, which is of alchemaic symbols. And when I first started making work with biomaterials, I was quite frustrated because they're a new material to me, and generally a new material in regards of the world and kind of material science. Trying to get them to do certain things was quite complicated, so I'd make something and then it would crack or shrink loads or not really be the form that I wanted it to be. But then I realised sort of halfway through that the joy of being an artist is that I can actually use that, and that became the work. So this is the first time that I've made a film work, and I have experience of working in film because I've worked with a really great friend and photographer called Paul Blakemore before, and we have this sort of collaborative relationship where I trust him so much that he can come in and document works and see them in a way that I also see them, but it's a slight different viewpoint, which I really appreciate, and a viewpoint that I totally rate. And in the last couple of years, he's made some video documentations of works, especially kind of ephemeral or performative works that don't really get to exist in any other format now apart from video. So the idea of using video for me for this show was purely because we basically collected so much information. There wasn't really a way of sharing all of that knowledge and all of that sort of exciting, weird facts, because I love facts, with an audience. So the premise of the film is a sort of culmination of different sites that I was interested in. So an energy from waste plant that's in Plymouth, Peter Clifford doing really great sleight of hand magic tricks, making things disappear, things from my local area that I think are relevant, and historical scientific facts, and relating all of these different stories together to kind of make one narrative film. And it's interesting to me because it's my voice doing the story, so it sits somewhere between a sort of, I guess, a documentary film and an art film, but it's a great learning curve to kind of play around with this new medium, and it was a joy to be able to present it here. We are greeted warmly by our contact and travel upstairs to the canteen to get a cup of tea, where I explain my interest in disappearing objects. I've always thought about what happens to all the stuff we use and create, pondering the life cycle, potential and demise of different materials. My interest in the relationship between waste and magic really came from this investigation into looking at things that stereotypically make things disappear, or things that we believe would disappear. So we all know that the rubbish in our lives disappears from our personal space, but I was interested in sort of navigating where it actually goes after that. And I think the link with magic is, we now know in current society that magic tricks and sleight of hand tricks aren't real. There isn't the kind of historical gaze that used to exist of some sort of witchcraft or misunderstanding. Like, we know that the magic tricks, you know, the wedding ring that the magician has hidden somewhere is still in the room. It's just we can't see it. The illusion has happened, but we don't believe the illusion. And I think that relationship between objects leaving our lives and our sort of discard of things, and the magician still having the ring, is like an interesting relationship. And, you know, science tells us that nothing can really disappear. So it sort of makes me think about how I want to use objects and which objects I want to have in my life, and looking at that from a kind of sustainability and a kind of climate crisis viewpoint. I thought it was an interesting thing to dig down into. I would like the audience to come to this show and recognise objects in it and maybe reassess their own relationship with those objects. So there's quite a lot of clues and hidden things that I really enjoy in this show. So I've tried to keep a certain amount of the performative aspect of magic and sort of theatre in the curation of the show. So there's a couple of objects that are not on obvious display, they're sort of hidden. Like, an example would be, in the film I talk about this diamond that gets nicked. That's a sculpture that I've made from the past. And then in the show is another diamond that's a sort of mini replica of that diamond, but we haven't put it on display with the other bronze sculptures. It's kind of in its own space. I think I want people to see that playfulness in a way that hopefully they enjoy, but also see the seriousness of how much waste we make, and maybe it's better to reuse things than just discard things.